Masaccio. Quiet, explosive, and brief, a single generation's leap that made the Renaissance visible. He painted bodies that seemed to occupy real space, faces that betrayed genuine feeling, and architectural vistas that opened like doors into the painted world. Working in Florence in the 1420s, Tommaso di Ser Giovanni, known to history as Masaccio, rewrote the rules of wall painting. His frescoes in the Brancacci Chapel and his revolutionary Holy Trinity transformed sacred narrative into human drama. Using linear perspective, weighty modeling, and a new honesty about light and volume, you'll meet Adam and Eve expelled with heartbreaking vulnerability, apostles who breathe and argue in believable light, and a Madonna whose solidity still surprises modern eyes. This is a story of invention, of collaboration with Masolino and inspiration from Brunelleschi's geometry, and of a life cut short just as the full force of his influence was beginning. Stay with me to unpack the paintings that changed Western art forever. Before we dive in, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support helps us keep creating more educational videos like this one. Masaccio was born Tommaso di Ser Giovanni in 1401 in the small Tuscan town of San Giovanni Valdarno. Records are sparse, but what we can piece together shows a restless, ambitious young painter who moved to Florence and quickly outpaced his peers. He collaborated with the older Masolino on commissions early in his career, and soon his sudden mastery of perspective and naturalistic form set him apart. His nickname, Masaccio, roughly Big or Clumsy Tom, survives like a humanizing footnote, a reminder that the man behind these precise mathematical constructions was, above all, a human being with a personality. A small handful of possible portraits and a fragment, sometimes called a self-portrait, hint at his face and presence, but the clearest memory is his art itself, loud and insistent. Even images once attributed to others have been argued to show his hand or influence, making the study of his biography almost inseparable from the study of his works. Masaccio's most important and most famous work is the fresco cycle in the Brancacci Chapel in Santa Maria del Carmine, Florence. Commissioned by the Brancacci family, the chapel became a workshop of ideas. Here Masaccio painted a sequence of scenes from the life of St. Peter and other biblical episodes that read together like a new grammar for painting. The cycle includes the tribute money, the expulsion of Adam and Eve, Peter healing the sick, the baptism of the neophytes, and the distribution of alms with the death of Ananias. These images are not isolated tableaux. They form a continuous narrative where figures move across believable space, where gestures and glances create a web of human interaction. Masolino began some scenes, Masaccio completed others. Later restorations would reveal Masaccio's original boldness, his layered paint, and his confident hand. Let's look closely at the tribute money, one of Masaccio's tour de force solutions to painting narrative and space at once. The scene stages 3 moments of the same story across a single landscape. Christ instructs Peter to find a coin in a fish's mouth. Peter pays the tax collector. Peter later receives counsel. Masaccio pulls the viewer through the episodes with carefully arranged sightlines and a single, coherent recession into space. Notice how the figures occupy ground. Their feet cast believable shadows, their bodies modeled by light and shade. The central cliff, the trees, the distant hills, all are subordinated to the dignity of the human ensemble. This is continuous narrative, married to rigorous perspective, and it became the template for generations of painters who wanted to tell complex stories in convincing space. Then there is the expulsion from the Garden of Eden, an image famous for its emotional honesty. In Masaccio's version, Adam and Eve do not appear as idealized, classical bodies, but as embarrassed, broken people. Eve covers herself with both hands. Adam shields his face and lowers his head in a pose of genuine shame. The anguish is sculptural. Masaccio used light to model the flesh, making them weighty, embarrassed, and oddly modern. Art historians have pointed to the psychological realism here as a radical move away from medieval symbolism toward human feeling. Restoration work has clarified the rawness of the paint and the force of the expressions, and the scene remains a touchstone for understanding how Masaccio translated spiritual narrative into a human drama that still moves viewers centuries later. Masaccio's command of communal scenes shows up again in St. Peter healing the sick with his shadow and in the baptism of the neophytes. In St. Peter Healing, the figure of Peter is authoritative. His shadow becomes an instrument of miracle, and the crowd around him is rendered with individual gestures and varied responses. In the baptism scene, Masaccio organizes dozens of figures with clarity, rhythm, and a believable sense of bodies turning in light. Both frescoes show his ability to compose complex groupings without losing intimacy. The works also offer a lesson in social art. They are public images meant to instruct and to move, theological ideas translated into human interactions we can recognize. If anyone asks where Renaissance perspective began to feel like architecture, point to the Holy Trinity. Painted for the Church of Santa Maria Novella, this altarpiece-level fresco constructs a deep chapel with a barrel vault and a coffered ceiling, all obeying a single vanishing point. Pilasters, steps, and the receding barrel vault create a theatrical trompe-l'oeil space where the painted architecture becomes an extension of real space. Beyond the geometry is another innovation. The figures are monumental but humane. Christ, God the Father, Mary, John, arranged with solemn balance. The illusion of depth is not an end in itself, it's a stage for devotional encounter. Contemporary visitors would have felt the painted chapel as an invitation to enter, to kneel, and to imagine themselves within the sacred scene. Masaccio did not only paint fresco cycles. His panel paintings, such as the various Madonnas and the panels from the Pisa altarpiece, show the same concern for volume and presence. The Madonna and Child works attribute to him, in the Uffizi and the National Gallery, among other places, reveal a tenderness married to solidity. The Virgin's weight, the Christ child's anatomical conviction, the careful treatment of materials. The Pisa altarpiece panels include a powerful crucifixion and predella scenes, where gold grounds meet human bodies, with an almost uneasy dialogue between older medieval convention and the new naturalism. These panels demonstrate that Masaccio's impulses were adaptable across media. Public frescoes and private altarpieces both became laboratories for his ideas about light, form, and sacred humanism. What makes Masaccio's style so immediately recognizable? First, the use of linear perspective as an organizing principle, not merely a trick, but a way to make narrative and architecture consistent. Second, a sculptural approach to light and shadow that gives figures weight and presence. Masaccio's chiaroscuro turns paint into flesh. Third, an interest in ordinary emotion, shame, surprise, argument, compassion, real human responses inside religious stories. He learned from Brunelleschi's geometry, collaborated with Masolino's grace, and influenced a parade of successors, Fra Angelico, Filippo Lippi, Domenico Ghirlandaio, and even the young Michelangelo, who studied the Brancacci frescoes. By the time of Masaccio's early death, his visual language had already seeded Florence with techniques that would define the High Renaissance. Masaccio's life ended in 1428. Some say from fever while he was in Rome, others suggest plague or a sudden illness, at roughly 26 or 27 years old. It's a startling fact. The hand that redirected Western painting belonged to a man who died barely into adulthood. Yet his influence outlived him dramatically. Artists flocked to study his frescoes. Later restorations revealed how much his palettes and brushwork had been altered by time. There are curious puzzles, disputed attributions, fragments scattered in museums, and debates about how much of the Brancacci cycle Masolino painted versus Masaccio. There's also small human detail. Masaccio's nickname, the debate about a possible self-portrait, and the idea that some of his boldest moves, the rawness of the Expulsion, the spatial certainty of the Trinity, were made simply because he dared to trust observation over inherited convention. That audacity is his true legacy. Masaccio's career was brief but seismic. He taught painters to think in space, to see the human body as an honest instrument of expression, and to build devotional images that felt immediate and real. Walking through the Brancacci Chapel today, you can still feel that moment when painting learned to breathe. If you remember one thing from his work, let it be this. Masaccio did not merely depict stories, he made them feel like events happening inside the world we inhabit. If you enjoyed this exploration, revisit the images, look for the details, the cast shadows, the turned heads, the architectural vanishing points, and you'll see how many later artists borrowed from a language he helped invent. Thanks for listening, and let the paintings keep speaking.